Welcome to the Mindset Advantage podcast with Elliot Rowe and Dr. Tricia Cardner. So Tricia, introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, it's Dr. Tricia Cardner, and I'm a peak performance strategist and the author of Positive Poker, as well as I have a chapter in Excelling at No Limit Hold'em.
And I'm Elliot Rowe. I'm a mindset coach. I work with poker players and athletes. So Tricia, what do you have for us this week?
Well, I just looked at a real interesting study which has to do with, does it matter what side of the bed you wake up on in the morning in terms of your performance? And this might sound like a silly question, but a couple of researchers, Rothbard and Wilk, published the study in the Academy of Management Journal. And they found evidence that the way you feel when you start out your day can have a significant impact on how your day actually unfolds. And that's not too surprising. Now, specifically, they looked at customer service representatives, and if they started the day out with a positive emotional kind of state, they could handle their calls more quickly and competently, and they would be less affected by negative customer behavior. Whereas the ones who started the day with negative emotions, of course, would experience the opposite effects. Now, true, this wasn't done with poker players, but I could kind of see where this could really impact poker players as well. So I just wanted to give a handful of tips on how you could have like a wake up routine that could help you get into that positive emotional state so you could handle the day better and maybe, be a little bit less tilty. So one of the things that researchers found is that you need to open your eyes as soon as the alarm goes off instead of hitting the snooze button a whole bunch of times, which is what I like to do. But basically, that helps you get off to a better start. And then if you do a little bit of stretching and maybe some deep breathing and think of a few things that you're thankful for or you're excited, to get to do or experience on this particular day, that can get you going right. And even smiling while you think of them is very helpful. We know that when you smile, even if it's a fake smile, it gets the chemicals in your brain pumping, and it's the good chemicals. So after a few minutes of even fake smiling, you will start to feel happier and more positive. So I feel like if people were to do those few things very religiously, it would help them to get up on the right side of the bed and just have a more positive and easier day overall.
So all those politicians with fake smiles are having a great time at the moment.
Well, at least they feel good, right?
Yeah, exactly. And today we've got a very interesting guest. We're going to do a meet the host. So I'm actually going to interview Tricia, talk about her history and what she does in poker and her thoughts specifically around the mental game. So if you can introduce yourself again, Tricia, but this time in a bit more detail for our listeners.
Well, I feel like, oh gosh, what do I say here? Because I want to, entertain people and of course, give them something that can benefit them. I've been around poker for less time than I've been around psychology. I first started playing poker probably around 2008. And I got started just because my husband was in the military and he was stationed in kind of a far off post and there wasn't a lot to do. And so the guys in his squadron and gals, but it was mostly guys, to be honest, they had a little poker game. And so I decided I would go, even though I'd never played cards before in my life, because what else was I going to do? And so as soon as I went to the game, I was like, oh my goodness, this is really an interesting game. And there's, obviously the math side, but I saw that there could be like a real big psychology component to it. And I got really into it. And so that's kind of the way I got mostly playing, we would play tournaments in these home games, if you will. And so I've kind of been more on the tournament side.
Excellent. And in terms of the sort of games that you play, you come out for the whole World Series, don't you? So what have you been doing from that side?
Well, I come out to the World Series, yes. I've been doing that. The first year I went to the series was in 2008, but I only played one thing. I had won a seat into the ladies event, and I did play that. And I did not do well because I really didn't know that much about, poker or tournament strategy or whatever. But just going there and getting like the little bit of the taste of it was enough that I was like, you know what, I really want to learn a lot more about this and do better. And so the next year I was playing a lot in those days on Full Tilt and I won. I don't know if our listeners will remember this, but back in the day, they had what they call bracelet races. And I think They were like 216 buy-ins, and then you would get like a 2000 package. And so what I would do is I would satellite up. So I would get a $26 token, if people remember those. And then I would take the 26 token and I would satellite into the 216 to play for the 2000. And I ended up winning. I can't remember exactly now how many it was, but it was a lot. I won like 9 or 10 of those packages.
Wow.
So it was game on from there. I got to go and just spend the summer, and I was like, this is fantastic. And I had a couple of small cashes, nothing too dramatic, but it was enough that, I had gone on somebody else's dime and, gave me that taste.
And caught the bug. They'd got you.
Yeah, it really got me good. So
awesome. And then, obviously we're on here as mindset coaches. You've got a very, very strong academic background, probably more so than anyone else in the industry. So what is that academic background?
Well, I've taken a long circuitous route around in the educational world. I have a doctorate in criminology. I have a doctorate in counseling psychology. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I've been around the psychology world for a really long time. Early in my career, I kind of worked with really bad people, if you will, hence the doctorate in criminology. So I worked a lot with sex offenders and, other violent type offenders. And I was really curious when I was younger about, what makes people do really bad things. And so that's what got me down that path. But it wasn't too long into that I was kind of like, this is not really going anywhere. And then I kind of flipped it, and I was really a lot more interested in what makes people really good. And by that, I mean, what helps people achieve, and, people do great things, and what is just kind of the psychology behind that. So that's what led me to get the second doctorate in counseling psychology. And I've been an academic as well as a licensed professional counselor. I taught, was a tenured psychology professor, actually developed a course in the psychology of poker that was an upper division elective at the last university I was at. So that was a lot of fun. And I've taught sports psychology and positive psychology and all those different kinds of things. So I'd say, yeah, as far as psychology goes, I really love it. And what I'm really interested in right now is making psychology and sort of like psychology hacks really accessible to poker players so that they can see there's so much more to mindset and to peak performance than just tilt and avoiding tilt.
And what would you say are those important things that some of your clients or the poker players you speak to are missing?
I mean, most of the time it has to do with just not understanding, how to develop your mental toughness, or, not understanding how to focus for long periods, or, there's sort of like these hot topics, self-control is one, motivation, confidence, even just developing your expertise, understanding that there is a set of steps you can follow to develop your expertise that will be more effective and efficient than what most people do. I mean, for almost any topic that I just mentioned, most people sort of, do it hit or miss, or maybe they just fall into, certain things, but they don't understand that you can actually take a sort of step-by-step approach to developing these skills. And if you look at like athletes or business executives, people who are really at the top of the heap, they've usually spent a lot of time conscientiously working on these types of skills or variables, whatever you want to call them. And that's what allows them to not only get to be the best, but actually stay the best.
And one of the things that I thought was sort of interesting there, this take on the positive psychology. And that's actually a form of psychology in itself, isn't it?
Yes, it is. A lot of people, when they think of positive psychology, I think they think of sort of the positive thinking, but that's not actually what positive psychology is. Positive psychology is the psychology of subjective well-being. And that's the short definition of it. So it's not like I'm going to think, oh, I'm going to be rich, or, oh, I'm going to win. It's not that, but it's all the things that contribute to subjective well-being, if that makes sense.
And what sort of things do you push in positive psychology to help poker players?
I mean, it's everything I've been talking about, just even at the top of the hour with what I was talking about having a proper wake up routine. There's a lot of things that contribute to happiness, or the term that we prefer in psychology is subjective well-being. There's many things that contribute to that. So, a lot of times when I'm working with a client, It's getting rid of a lot of the bad negative stuff. But even more important is adding in things that are going to get you what you want. So you kind of have to set up your day in a specific way, or there's specific things that you can do to improve performance. But you just have to be willing to kind of regiment yourself and do these things. But you can see very good increases in, subjective well-being, how much success you're getting, ROI can improve tremendously. It's just with these little tweaks and hacks that I've, kind of been talking about on the show as we went along.
And I think that's one of the things, you were mentioning. A lot of guys, when, I'll say I'm a mindset coach, I'm sure you do as well. And the person say, well, I don't tilt, so I wouldn't need to work with you. And then, as people have been listening over the weeks, we've had all of these very, very successful poker players on who are working with mindset coaches, and they're not looking to necessarily remove negatives. They're looking to bring positives into their game. Mm-hmm. That's more what you're talking about, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, to me, tilt is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, the best players in the world that I personally work with on my roster, tilt is a non-issue for them. But for people who are just starting out, maybe tilt seems like it's overwhelming and that's really making a bad impact for them. But once you get past the tilt, there's so much more. I mean, you look at people who compete, say at the Olympic level, they all work with mindset coaches or sports psychologists, all of them without exception. I mean, and these are the best technical, physical specimens in the world, right? And they, controlling emotions, which is what tilt is all about, is part of it, but it's just a small part of what they do to really optimize their training and just get to where they want to be. And what we're seeing the best poker players are wanting to use those same tools to get to the top and to stay at the top. And as you well know, in No Limit Hold'em, the games have gotten tougher and tougher and tougher. And you have to get whatever edge is available to you. And the guys and gals at the very top, they know full well that edge, the edge that's left has to do with the mental game. But it's not really tilt that they're getting rid of. It's adding in all these sort of, optimization strategies and efficiency strategies.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the interesting things you mentioned with, Olympic athletes. And we think of Olympic athletes, they are the best in the world at what they do. And they're all using mindset coaches, trying to move that part of their game forward. In reality, a mid-stakes poker player probably makes more money a year than they do.
Oh,
so we have these athletes investing all this money for Olympic gold. But, there are poker players out there saying, well, I don't need that. And they have a much, much larger improvement in their income.
Oh, I mean, we're talking a poker player, how it earns every professional athlete that I can think of. If you look at what the winner of the main event of the World Series gets versus the winner of Wimbledon or, the major golf tournaments and things like that, I mean, it dwarfs.
Yeah, as prize money for an individual prize, it's enormous.
It's enormous. And then, think about cash games or people who are grinding the circuit who travel, I don't know how many stops it is now. It's 2022. I hit some of the stops myself, but not all of them. But, you do have people who grind all those stops. And it's like, you don't want to give away money by not having your mental game as good as it can be.
And I mean, I'm probably sounding a bit like a stuck record mentioning this same sort of stuff week after week after week, but it really is a professional sport. And so few poker players see it that way. I speak to lots of people, oh no, it's not a sport, it's a game. It's a game that I'm playing. And by calling it a game they're playing, they're giving themselves an out. They're giving themselves an excuse to not really be professional, to not take it seriously. But when you start to judge it, how would you feel if your favorite basketball player said, I'm good enough now, I don't need to go to training? You'd be shocked. But I hear poker players all the time tell me, I don't need to study, I'm brilliant. And it is exactly the same thing.
Well, you might be brilliant. That's true. But, like I said, if you go back to like the Olympic athletes or the world champions, they are brilliant. But they understand that, a lot of times it's 1/100th of a second or something like that separates them, first from second place. And so they understand that the mental game is kind of the final frontier. And if you want to be really serious in poker, I think the mental game, I'll tell you this too, besides the mental game being very important, I can actually tell where someone is at in their development as a poker player by how they talk about the mental game and what their opinion is on it. People who are low in their development, or they are not very far in their development, and maybe they're even just stuck, you will always hear them poo poo the mental game or say, oh, I don't need that, or I'm not interested in that. But without exception, every one of the top players that I've talked to or worked with, they see how valuable the mental game is.
Yeah, I mean, it's much more visible now. People are talking about it more. And we're actually, seeing really, the physical effects of it in some of these tournaments we watch. Obviously, we had Brian on the other week. He came on, he won the Super High Roller Bowl for all of that money. And he really worked extensively on his mental game, both prior to the event, and then he had a full routine ready for him. Stayed absolutely in the zone. And, you guys will see it on TV when it's shown. He was incredibly focused for that event. And that's what we're talking about in terms of the Olympic athletes. This is the tiny difference that can make all of the difference when we're talking about being the best in the world, winning that biggest tournament, playing that difficult hand perfectly.
And I want to just kind of mention, to kind of follow up with what you're saying. It takes time to work on your mental game, and you have to build routines, and you have to practice the mental skills. So it's not like I can just tell you, oh, do this one thing, and you do this one thing this one time and you're done. You have to conscientiously work on whatever mental skill you're building and put it into practice long before you need it. So it's something like you always have to be working on, if that makes sense.
It's you're exercising another muscle.
Right.
And, it's your mental tolerance muscle.
Right.
And it is something that, if you stop using your biceps will get weak. And if you stop working on your mental game, you're opening yourself up to that risk again.
Exactly. And, even self-control. I talk a lot about self-control in my book, Positive Poker. And I even refer to it as a muscle because it really does function like a muscle, and you can build it up. And conversely, when you overuse it, it does weaken and tire. And so there's certain things that you can do to, kind of build it back up. But people need to be aware of that. A lot of these mental skills are like muscles that you do need to build up, but you also need to rest at the appropriate times.
And then thinking about, those sort of tips and hacks and things, is there a favorite hack that you have for people that our listeners could just, check out and give a try for themselves?
I mean, there's so many. It's so hard to think of what is the best one. I know, because to me, it depends on the person, because when I work with somebody, I really try to personalize to that person. But you know what I would say? I would say set goals. And I know everybody's like, oh God, not goal setting. I think that's a little bit overworked, but have some goals for yourself. And the reason I say that is because setting and achieving goals helps with focus, it helps with motivation, and it helps with confidence. So, make plans. If you don't like the word goals, use the word plans. So make plans for each day and each week that are going to move you towards, your long-term objective, whatever that might be. I can remember talking to Gripst, and he told me the story secondhand about Greg Merson. And he said Greg Merson had set a goal that he was going to play 1 million hands in a year, and he was going to, achieve, I can't remember what levels he was playing, but anyway, he was going to achieve a certain profitability to where he was going to make $1 per hand, and he was going to play 1 million, and he was going to get, $1 million for that year. And so by having that goal, he knew exactly how much he had to play each day, and he knew how to break it down, and he could track it and all this sort of thing. And guess what? He did achieve his goal. And this was before he won the main event championship. So set goals and make them small, make them measurable, every day. Say, what is the top 3 things that I want to achieve for today, or the 3 most important things, and then go after those things. And that's going to help in a lot of ways.
And for all of the poker players thinking about that, they also have to be things that you control.
Absolutely.
So it needs to be, not, in this session I'm going to win, 8 buy-ins. It needs to be, hand numbers, hours of study, things like that, rather than just purely financial short-term goals.
Yeah, the financial is very difficult to do, even though Greg Merson did do a variant, but he had a real good idea because he had his record. So he knew what his big blinds per 100 was. And so
yeah, so his goal is almost just, I'm going to stay where I am in the game or slightly improve, and I'm going to put in the volume I need to.
Right.
That's hugely different from someone just saying, I'm going to make $100,000, and I don't know how, but I am.
Right.
Because that's obviously so much harder to control than, just a hand number multiplication.
Exactly.
And what have you got planned? What is it you're looking to sort of bring into the industry over the next few years?
Well, I'll tell you, I've got all kinds of plans. I mean, we're doing webinars presently, and I would like to bring my course. I did the Psychology of Poker course at a university, and I want to bring that to the internet so that, all poker players can access that. Of course, I've already written a book and I'd like to put out some more books. So I just intend to really make psychology as accessible as it can possibly be to poker players. So hopefully they can use, actual scientific psychology to improve their games and their ROI. I'm really against this self-helpy type material that, has been pretty prevalent in our society, but it's not based in any sort of, science or research, just sort of like this, chant positive affirmations and you'll be great. I'm against all that stuff. What I really like is what we call clinically, evidence-based research. So I won't say that all the research in psychology is perfect because it's certainly not. A lot of what we do has to be correlational in nature just because of ethical reasons and things like that. But at least, I like for people to have a basis for why they should be using something. And I just want to bring a lot more of that to the poker world.
So it's introducing these hacks, but then with each of the hacks having a scientific, tested clinical approach, reason behind it.
Right. I mean, there has to be something. I mean, I can chant all day long, I'm a huge winner, I'm a huge winner. But if I don't actually do the work, I'm not going to be a huge winner unless I just get really, really lucky. And how many times can I get really, really lucky? Once, twice. I mean, that's probably about it.
And in terms of from your poker side, what are you looking to do within the game in terms of playing?
Well, I tell you, I'm still playing MTTs. I have a tournament that's kind of close to where I live. It's called The River, and it's coming up here really soon. And I've actually final tabled it in the past. And so I'd love to repeat that performance. And as far as like my own study, I really, I belong to a lot of the training sites. And I, watch the videos and I take the notes and I do the hand histories and I do all of the stuff that many people, and including myself sometimes think is boring, but is definitely a necessity.
Yeah, and I think, especially when it comes, I mean, predominantly you're playing live poker, aren't you?
Yes, I used to play online, like I was mentioning at the top of the show, but that's
Since the changes and yeah.
right. That's gone. And so, yes, I play mostly live and I'll hit circuit events that are near me or kind of the bigger events that are near me. And then, of course, the World Series in the summer. So it's not as much fun, as back in the day when I could grind multiple tables online. But live, I feel like you can have a much bigger edge live than online. And the mental game, it's important online, but it's even more important in the live arena, I think.
And I mean, it's something I was going to mention. That I definitely notice a huge difference between the number of online players who will be looking for mindset coaching, looking for the videos, looking to work through those parts of their game, versus the live players. If you are a live player out there, there is an enormous edge if you can work on your mental game, because so few people are doing it. Most high stakes online players will have at least read some books on the subject, perhaps work with a coach. When you're talking about still relatively high stakes, perhaps in Las Vegas, so few of the players are really actively working on their mental game. I mean, a lot of them aren't really working on their technical game. So it really is something where there's a huge edge to be had if you're a live player playing in some of these circuit events where no one else or very few of the other people there will be doing the same work as you.
I think your edge is way bigger live. I mean, online, most of the people who are playing online, they're technically competent. Live, you've got people who are not as technically competent and they're missing the mental game piece. So it's huge in a lot of cases.
Yeah, so you're going to go enjoy crushing the other players there.
I'm going to do my best.
You're going to put some people on tilt. And, the question we always ask, and today it's me asking you, what is the worst case of tilt that you've seen?
Oh, gosh. You think I would have
You knew it was coming.
I know. I knew it was coming. I've seen people throw tantrums at the table. I had a guy throw a tantrum against me. He was very, very upset because I'm trying to remember what the hand is. This has been a couple years ago. It was during the summer. It was in Las Vegas during the series. And we were blind versus blind. He was a big blind. I was the small blind. And I played the hand in such a way. I had a very good read on him and what he had. And I played the hand in such a way that he would put in all his chips and I could just call him. And so I did. And then when the cards flipped over, he just jumped up and he just started screaming and yelling and telling me what a donkey I was and all this sort of thing. So I'd say that's probably been the most dramatic.
And as a mindset coach, how did you deal with this aggressive man shouting at you?
Well, I said something I probably shouldn't have said, but I suggested he go on his merry way. Let's just put it that way. But I'm pretty well known in the live rooms, in terms of with the dealers and like the tournament director type staff and stuff. So I knew that if anything really came of it, they would step in
pretty
and
well covered.
They would help me out. So
yeah, and the important thing is then on to the next hand once he leaves, isn't it?
Oh, of course. I mean, even if I take a quote unquote bad beat, I just move on to the next hand. There's nothing you can do about it in the moment except for be grateful that people try to give you their money and they weren't successful in getting it whenever you took a bad beat, and that's fine. But you just have to go on to the next hand and play it the best that you can play it. And that's it.
Yeah, it's a simple game.
Easy game.
Easy game. So everyone go out there, just make lots of money and follow that advice. Well, thanks so much for doing this, Tricia. I just wanted to introduce everyone to Tricia, so you've got an idea of her background and where we're coming from while we're talking to the other players about their mental games, and basically just giving you a bit of background information. So Tricia, if someone wants to work with you, how do they get in contact with you?
Well, I have a website. It's drtriciacardner.com. So drtriciacardner.com. Or you can follow me on Twitter. It's also at Dr. Tricia Cardner. Those are probably the two best ways, I'd say, to get a hold of me.
Excellent. And obviously, you can tune in and listen to our voices every week as well to our podcast direct to your phone.
Absolutely.
and if anyone wants to look at my products or services, I'm at pokermindcoach.com. Thanks all for listening, and we'll be back again next week.
Thanks, guys.